This is a Raspberry Pi 5. It is a micro PC, I think is what they call these things. Anyhow, it is a little teeny tiny computer that has a processor, RAM. It's got your I/O, various I/O ports all over this thing. And we use these in small projects where we don't need a full-size computer, and something a little smaller, a little more power efficient can serve the job. So I use these in my ham shack. And for those who don't know, a ham shack is a safe space for amateur radio operators to do nerdy things. So over the years, I've used Raspberry Pis on different projects. This is a Raspberry Pi 4 that is attached to a TNC, or a terminal node controller, I think is what it stands for. Anyhow, you use this to connect your computer to your amateur radio, and then your computer can do various things. Here is another Raspberry Pi 4 that is attached to an MMDVM hat. And that is a multi-mode digital voice modem. That's what it is, MMDVM, multi-mode digital voice modem, which allows this thing to receive signals from a DMR radio like this one. And what it does is it takes that and it translates it through the Pi and transmits it over the internet. And you can talk to people on the other side of the world that have similar configuration. And then here's one more Raspberry Pi 4 that I've used over the years, and I've used this one to control my radio via cat control. I controlled an ICOM 7300. Cat control is a computer-aided terminal, I think is what it's considered. Anyhow, it allows you to use this as a computer that can control your radio to do various things, or you can run software on here to control your radio. Anyhow, they're all pretty handy. Now, what I'm going to do with this one is build it into this mini PC case. Now, what I want to mention is I was sent both the Raspberry Pi and this mini PC case from Elecrow, or Elecrow. I'm not sure how you say it, so I'm going to probably say it both ways during the course of this video. But they reached out to me and they asked if I would do a video review of these products. And of course I said yes, because I like Raspberry Pis and I like doing videos. So that means they sent this to me free of charge in exchange for this video review. If you are the type of person who is triggered by sponsored content on YouTube, I'd suggest you go watch some cat videos. All right, so let's take a look and see what we have in here. It is a pretty fancy box. And they do make this case for the Raspberry Pi and the Jettison Orin and Nano. I don't even know what that is, but you can see there's a little bit of a check here for Raspberry Pi. So let's open this up. And I'll have a link to this below, but it's around 40 bucks if I remember correctly. There's a piece of something in here. It looks like plexiglass. Another piece of plexiglass. Everything seems to be labeled. We have some instructions here. And they assured me that these were easy to follow, but we won't know until we get in here. This is for the Jetson. Let's see if we got the right instructions. Okay, here we go. Here are the instructions for the Raspberry Pi. Let's put these over here out of the way, see what else we got. This is labeled. This looks like you can see for your I/O to come in and out. This feels like it's part of the actual PC case itself. And this thing is small. I thought it was going to be a little bit bigger based off the size of the box. But it's relatively tiny. Here is another part / piece. Let's get this over here. Raspberry Pi cooler. Let's take a look at this thing and see what we got. Okay, so this is a little something that sticks onto the top of the Raspberry Pi, and it's got a little fan on there. That's pretty cool. Fans, so you can see in here we got a couple, was that 3 fans? I guess this thing is going to stay cool. OLED module, and just parts and parts galore. I like that everything's labeled. That's actually pretty good organization. But man, this is an awful lot of parts in here. What is this thing? Raspberry Pi 5 GPIO adapter, a screwdriver for non-man hands. I'd probably use a different screwdriver to put this thing together. What is this thing? PCIe to SSD adapter board. So I did pick up a PCIe. This is a terabyte drive. because you can connect those in here, and then you can run your Pi off of this. I think this is about 65 bucks. I don't remember. I can include a link below. And then we have a power button, and that looks like it's everything inside the box. So let's get this box out of the way, and we'll begin assembly. Okay, I do have my splaining glasses on so I can read this, but it looks like we install a couple of studs on this part of the case. So let's go ahead and do that now. I went through all the parts, and I believe I have found the studs. All right, so we got the studs on there. The hardest part of this is that my old dead fingers, buttery fingers, getting these things in there and screwed in was a little bit of a challenge, but that's a me thing, probably not a you thing. Let's take a look at step number 2. Step number 2 shows these silicon pads, which we found here, and then there's 2 rivets in there, and then we put those on our Raspberry Pi 5, and then we adhere this thing and rivet it down. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, and we're installed, and I'll tell you what, man, those rivets are in there. This cooler is never coming off of that Pi. Now, this wire here looks like it plugs in somewhere. And Raspberry Pi 5 cooler, it looks like it plugs into this one here next to the rivet. It says it's a 4-pin connector, but I can't see in there to see if it's 4 pins. Let's see if we can figure this out. All right, and we got it in there. So I guess that's how we do. All right, let's take a look at step number 3. All right, step number 3 right here is the GPIO adapter and then the PCIe to SSD adapter board. And we connect those to the Raspberry Pi. And this looks pretty simple. It just slides on in like that, I'm assuming. Okay, and that's kind of snug. And you can see it adds 2 HDMI ports, but I guess that's the 2 mini HDMI ports that got used there. And then it adds this USB-C, but that USB-C gets used over there. Now let's take a look at this thing. This is our GPIO adapter board. And that looks like it just slides it in right here. And look at that, I got that on without any bending of pins, at least that I know about. All right, step number 4. It looks like we got a little teeny ribbon cable here. And that ribbon cable connects, it looks like it connects from here to here. So we would connect that ribbon cable here to here. Let me go find that. Okay, if you look at it, it actually calls for 2 cables, the 16-pin PCIe and then this 2-pin terminal wire. All right, when you install these, see this thing here? It slides up and down. I'm not sure you can see that. Right now it's down, and then you just use your fingernail and you can pull it up. And then that's where you slide the wire in. And then you slide that down, and it does like a press fit. Each side of this cable, like this side is labeled SSD. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. But that would tell me that it goes in here like this. And then just click this thing down. I hope that was a good click. All right, so we have the 2-pin and then we have the ribbon connector, and these all seem relatively solid. All right, let's take a look at step number 5. Step number 5 is just putting in some set screws. It looks like there's a whole mess of them. You know, I just realized something as I was getting ready to mount this in the case. Once this is screwed down, I no longer have access to this. And what that is where you put your micro SD card. Now, we have a micro SD card here that I'll show you how I did it, but I formatted it earlier, and it's a 64 gigabyte card. But I'm just going to slide that baby in there because I would hate to screw this thing to the chassis. I mean, maybe there's a way to get it out. There's a slot here. But, you know, unless I did something wrong, I don't see that being accessible because the way that they say to screw this thing in is like this. And if we do that, where's that slot? Yeah, that slot's nowhere near where that card is. So I wonder if this is where you run out like a ribbon cable or something like that. But anyhow, so good thinking on my part for a change. I went ahead and I installed this card. All right, so these two screws, one here and one here, went in, two screws here, and a couple of screws throughout this thing. But it's starting to come together pretty good. Now, I will say that the alignment of these two screws was a little bit difficult, but that might have just been the way I mounted it or pressed these pins in or whatever. But we got it done. Taking a look at our instructions, step number 6 is installing this battery right here. They call it the CR1220, and that's the size for a lithium battery. I believe it's a lithium battery. Anyhow, it goes in there, and then we're going to mount our solid-state drive. All right, and I'm going to say, man, I'm glad I noticed that. So I was going through the parts looking for the battery for this step, whatever's next, and I found the TFT card adapter slot. So you can see it goes right here, and now the card sticks out, which makes that a million times easier. Well, that was a pain in the butt to take all that apart and redo it again. I'm glad I did it now versus finding out later. All right, so next thing we need to do is put this battery and then our PCIe card in. Woo! All right, so we got the battery in, and then we got the external hard drive down and mounted. It goes in with this screw right here. So I think this piece is done for a little while. If I take a look at step number 7, it's installing the 3 fans, the on-off switch, and then the OLED module. And all of those get installed on this particular thing. So I'm going to go do that, come back and show you this when it's done. I got stuff everywhere and it's driving me crazy. All right, if I take a look at this, let me get this over here. If I take a look at this, we got the 3 fans installed. We have the OLED module, you can see it there, and then we installed this power button. Now there was a piece of wire loom around this power button cables, but it was making me mad and I got rid of it. So here's where we are now. The next step is to snap this baby on the back of this thing somehow. So let me go figure that out. All right, so we must be making progress because I'm running out of parts, and I guess that's a good thing. So we got all these fans installed. Here's another one up here. We got the OLED. I think I showed that, and then I got this housing mounted in here. Now, a quick tip is that if you're going to build this, I would run your fan cables and plug them in here. They go into this adapter board. And then I just added some cable ties in here just to clean this up because these cables are long and they were going all over the place. So just cleaned it up to make it look a little bit better and make it easier, I guess, to work on. But here's where we are now. Let's see what we have. So if I look at step 9, it's plugging in the power cable, and I did that, or the power button, I did that too. So let's go down to step 10. Oh, no, there's still some more on step 9 that we need to do. We need to run this cable as our Raspberry Pi GPIO adapter. I guess that's what it says it goes to, but we have these 2 cables right here. So I guess we need to run those, and then install this piece, and then our glass, and then I think we're almost done. All right, so hopefully I didn't destroy it, but we had a problem. So one of these ribbon cables, you can see it down here, actually had to go underneath the Raspberry Pi and run around and connect here to this expansion board, GPIO expansion board. So the entire thing came apart. I mean, stripped down to the beginning of the project and put it back together. And a little trouble getting this ribbon cable into the OLED. Hopefully I didn't damage the ribbon cables, but I think I'm okay. I think we're back together. I'm going to call it quits for today. I've had enough. So I'll join you the next time. Okay, this is a copy of Raspberry Pi Imager version 196 that is running. You can download this from the Raspberry Pi website. I'll have a link below to help you out. But I'm running it on a Windows 10 machine. And first thing I want to do is come over here to Raspberry Pi device. I hit that. Says no filtering, show every possible image. And I'm not 100% sure what that is, does, or means. But here we have Raspberry Pi 5, 500 and Compute Module 5. That's what we're installing on a Raspberry Pi 5. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that. Over here in the center, we have Operating System, and we can choose the operating system. And here's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to pick Raspberry Pi OS, formerly known as Raspbian. It's now called Raspberry Pi OS 64-bit. Why 64-bit? Because it sounds better than 32-bit. There's some other images on here. Let's just take a quick look. Here's some Raspberry Pi Lite, OS Full, different versions, 32, 64-bit. I'm going to go ahead and go back. There's just some other stuff here if you want to choose that, but we're choosing the 64-bit. So let's do that. choose storage. I'm going to hit that. Now down here in the lower right-hand corner, I have a checkbox that says exclude system drives. That means I'm not going to accidentally install it on something I don't want. Here I have a Lexar microSD RDR USB device, 63.9 gigabytes, mounted as D&E. And this is a SD card that I use for a former Raspberry Pi. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to click that. This next button now is illuminated. I'm going to go ahead and click that. Would you like to apply OS customization settings? Okay, let's see what we have. So it says set host name, Raspberry Pi, set username and password, configure wireless LAN. I'm actually going to do that. Hidden SSID, no. Let's click on services, enable SSH. I'm going to do that. Use password authentication, sure. Down here, let's see what options we have. Play sound when finished, sure. Eject media when finished, and enable telemetry. So we're just going to leave it as is. How come I can't fix validation errors in general tab? Oh, wireless LAN country. There we go. We are in the United States, but don't tell anybody. There we go. We're going to hit save. And we're going to hit yes. All existing data on your Lexar micro SD. I don't know why it says Lexar. I don't believe that's what it is. Yes, we want to do that. And now it's writing. Okay, and after it verifies the installation, which says 64-bit has been written to your SD card device, you can now remove the card from the reader. I'm going to hit continue, and we're back at the beginning. All right, folks, so we're back, and I finished putting this together, which really just included putting the plexiglass on and this part right here. I did mention that I didn't pay attention in the instructions, and I had to tear this thing down, and that was a little bit of a hassle. Totally my fault. What I want to do now is I want to power this up, but after putting it together, the only part that I have left over is this little teeny screw right here, and I'm sure I missed that somewhere along the way. Maybe they put an extra one in the bag, I don't know. These are the rubber feet that you put on the case, and I got a few of those left over. You just put them on these things, and they'll actually come in handy. And then there's some adhesive tape, and I don't know what that was for, but we didn't end up using it. Let's go ahead and power this thing up. So to power this up, we just take a USB-C power supply cable. I did buy one of these and just plug it in right there. And then I guess I got to turn this thing on. There we go. So you can see the OLED. It says Elecrow on there, and you can see the fans are lighting up, and we seem to have power everywhere. What I want to do now is I want to see if I can find this thing on my network and secure shell into it. So if you remember when we built the SD card, I did set it up so we could do remote SSH. Oh, I also want to mention on the instructions here, there are some pieces of software that need to be installed to make this thing work correctly, some drivers and things like that. You can scan this QR code and you can get that information. All right, folks, so now we're going to connect to the Raspberry Pi. If you remember correctly, when we formatted the SD card and installed the operating system, we set it up so you could do secure shell or SSH into the Raspberry Pi. This is the command to do that, so let me go ahead and do that. It's asking me if I want to continue because there is a key fingerprint that needs to transfer. We're going to say yes, password, and now we are connected, which is a good thing. Now there's a couple things that we need to do here. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to update everything. And this just updates our libraries, and it's done. And then now what we want to do is we want to install a program called Git. And this is something that comes off of Git, allows us to use GitHub. So that's the command for that. And now that that's done, we want to make sure that we are in our home directory. So I can do pwd home pi. That's exactly where I want to be. So now what we're going to do is we are going to clone some code from a repository. And the command for that is right here. And now that that's done, we want to change our directory to that directory. And I do that by going like this. There we go. And now we need to change directory to Raspberry Pi. And there we go. Let's just make sure that we're there. And we are. So now we need to copy some files from this directory. So if I take a look inside this directory, I can do an ls, and that will show us all the stuff. This is the stuff that we need to move. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy these. Okay, what those files allow us to do is use the external hardware that we added to the Raspberry Pi. So now what we're going to do is we are going to enable some services, and then we are also going to change the permissions on some files. We are also going to install some software. Okay, now we need to edit a configuration file. And this is the command for that. And let's go all the way down to the bottom. And now we want to exit out of here. We want to save our file, and that is done. Now we want to reboot the environment. Okay, we are inside the Raspberry Pi. Now what we want to do now is install a viewer that will allow us to connect to this and then run the little teeny tiny server headless. So we're going to install something called WayVNC, which is for the Wayland windowing system. Okay, now that that's installed, we need to make a few configuration changes. There we go. Now we are going to exit out of this. Save the buffer. Yes. Uh-oh. Okay, I just had to make a directory for Wayland. So now we should be able to write our file. There we go. There we go. So now we're going to exit out. It's going to ask us to save the buffer. Yes. Okay, I think I made a mistake here. Okay, we're good. Okay, now we want to configure the system to run this service for us. And now we want to set it to run on boot. And now we should be done. So let me fire up VNC Viewer and see if we can connect remotely. Okay, here's VNC Viewer, and I can go new connection, and for host name, we'll call it Desktop Pi. And I messed up already because I need to put the IP address in here, 192.168.50.97, if I remember correctly. And let's see if it connects. What? Refused by the computer? Maybe we need to reboot. Okay, let's try to connect. And it's telling us it doesn't have a record of connecting. That's okay. Continue. Username and password. And there we go. We are able to connect to the Raspberry Pi. And it looks like my internet's running a little bit slow. We are kind of far from the access point, but I would suspect that it is the Wi-Fi in the Pi that is slowing us down, not my desktop. Anyhow, that's going to wrap up this video. What I'd like to say is thank you everybody for watching, and thank you to Elecrow for sending me these products for my consideration. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or recommendations, go ahead and post them below, and I'll do my best to respond. As always, thank you for watching.